Welcome to Brave Inflections. My name is Claudelle and thank you very much for watching this video and for visiting the website. In this video, I want to have a quick conversation around self-awareness. Self-awareness is one of those things that are crucial for good leadership. But we live in a world where we are so busy, we're so busy putting out fires, we're so busy trying to navigate through constant uncertainty that we hardly make time to sit back and reflect and self-reflect and have a conversation with ourselves about ourselves and how we show up in the world, and having a good understanding of who we are, a good understanding of our identity. So when we talk about self-awareness, most people tend to have a very one-dimensional view of self-awareness. And it typically, if you were to ask them to talk about um, their self-awareness, it would be more described in behaviors that are common to the patterns that they see forming in their lives. So they would be talking about their personality. So Claudelle would say that Claudelle is X, and this is how Claudelle normally behave, and this is what Claudelle thinks she is, and this is what Claudelle thinks her identity is. But self-awareness is much broader than that and much deeper than that. And there are various dimensions to self-awareness. Now, I've chosen a few that I want to focus on in this video. And I'm hoping that as I'm going through the various elements, that it will help you to just stop in your own tracks and reflect a little bit more about your own self-awareness. And the more self-aware we become, the more we realize where our areas are that we need to improve on. The more we realize that our strengths, what our strengths are, but where our strengths can improve. Because the fact that you have a strength doesn't mean that that strength is operating at optimal level. But also being able to see and understand when our strengths can be counting or working against us. Right? So a certain a strength may be good to employ in a certain situation, but in other situations it may not be great to use that same strength. But the same as our weaknesses, so being aware of our weaknesses and understanding when it is that we need to pull ourselves back, and how do we counterbalance, being aware of the potential pitfalls for us as individuals, and how do we navigate around those particular pitfalls. And so the first area that I want to focus on is the one, I suppose, those who go one tier beyond just thinking about their behavior, the normal behavior that they see within themselves, and being able to describe their personality, is that conversation about our inner world and understanding how our inner world informs our actions and our behaviors. And to what degree are we aware of what informs our actions and behaviors? So when I do X, do I understand what is the driver behind X? An example that I like to use is anger. So when we are operating in anger and we're starting to lash out in anger around us, more often than not, the trigger is an emotion called pain. So if we don't know how to deal with our pain, that pain may manifest in anger. So if we understand what is informing our inner world, what is happening in our inner world that is informing our actions and our behavior, it becomes a lot easier for us to navigate around ourselves, to be able to start to deal with those elements within ourselves that result in negative behaviors or a negative impact in the environment around us. But when we talk about our inner world, It is also important for us to understand that most of us are very, very unaware of what is really going on underneath the surface. Now, take the analogy, if you take your brain, and I've used the analogy of an iceberg, the tip of the iceberg is what you see and what you are aware of. And that is where your conscious mind is sitting. But the bulk is sitting underneath the waterline, and that is your subconscious mind. And if you don't make an effort to go into deep dive under the waterline, you then become controlled by what is sitting under the waterline without you realizing what is actually happening. Right? So our conscious mind is about 12% that sits above the waterline. That's where the thinking happens, the planning, the analyzing, the things that we are aware of, our short-term memory, our willpower. Those are the things that we are aware of. But as I said, tip of the iceberg makes up a small percentage of our actual awareness. Right? Our subconscious mind is where our emotions and our feelings sit, our beliefs, our values, and our habits, the intuition, creativity, and our dreams, the long term memories, the involuntary bodily functions that we don't really have much control over, the protective responses. Right? So, a protective response may be that if you got hurt, maybe as a child, I'm talking about emotional pain, you may find that when you're in a situation that resembles that situation in your childhood where you got hurt, you may go into a protective response. And in that protective response, not realizing that that is driving the behavior that you're expressing. So you need to be aware. And it's the first step to self-awareness is the awareness that most of what is driving your thinking or your behavior is sitting underneath that waterline. So the more you want to grow as an authentic leader and as a good, strong leader, the more you need to deep dive under the waterline and start to think about and explore what is actually driving my behavior. If there's a pattern in my life where I see I'm constantly angry or irritated, people just irritate me. I don't want to be around human beings, or I just find that there are certain negative behaviors that keep on playing out, or I keep on attracting the same negative things to myself. Being able to then go back and start to go and look at what is driving that, what are the triggers. The other dimension that also make part of your inner world and that we often not aware of or don't even think about is how our body functions in relation to our brain. Right? So if you take your gut, for example, many are starting to call your gut your second brain because there's a strong connection between your gut and your brain. So what you put in your gut, and if your gut is in a healthy state, you affect your brain positively. If your gut is not in a healthy state, it does affect you. So I'll give you this example. So I am fructose sensitive. Discovered that a few years ago. So if I get fructose into my system, it has the opposite effect of what you would think it would. Normally people would associate fructose sugar with giving you energy. For me, it's the exact opposite. It actually gives me brain fog. So when I discovered that the fructose sensitivity is causing brain fog, and I stopped or minimize my fructose intake, I could clearly see the effect on my brain, right? So, or how I think, in my mood. If my gut is not in a happy space, I am not in a happy space. My mood is not in a happy space, and that will come out in my actions, in my behaviors, and the way I think and the way I make decisions. Right? So part of that inner world of yours is not just about what sits under the waterline in terms of your subconscious, is also your body and how what you put into your body and how that affects your behavior. there is this very, very strong correlation between your moods and your, which would infect then in turn affect your actions, your thoughts and your actions. A very strong correlation with where your gut is and what you're putting into your gut. Another dimension of self awareness, and now we're starting to go a little deeper, that most people really don't think about, is how you show up. What is it that others see when they look at you? Now, not to confuse this with some people's obsession with being concerned about what people think of them, and being worried that people will think badly of them. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a healthy understanding of how you show up and how people perceive you, to have a good understanding of when others look at you, what do they see? So I'll use myself as an example again, and it took me a long, many years to figure this out. um, is that I can have, and this is part of this, is typical of my personality type. I'm an MBTI fan, so in MBTI terms, I'm an INTJ. And INTJ females tend to be rare, so we tend to often be misunderstood. But part of the INTJ demeanor is that we can come across as aloof. And I wasn't aware of this. For in growing up, I didn't realize that when people look at me, they see somebody aloof. And when the penny eventually dropped, I was like, oh my God, um, that is what people think? Really? That is not the intention. That is not what I wanted to project. But in understanding that that is what people see when they first encounter me or they first engage with me, um, I then needed to work on how do I deal with that, and how do I adapt? How do I counteract that? Right? But understand, having a good understanding of what is it that others see when they look at you. And a good way of coming to that understanding is to ask people who will be honest with you. I'm not talking about people who will just say nice things to you because they want to be nice to you, or they have a vested interest in you having a positive view of them, but those people in your life who would tell you the truth. Right, so that you can start to see and understand, and it's part of your self awareness because it can have an impact. So let's go back to the Claudelle example. If Claudelle shows up in a room and she's not aware of the fact that her aloofness is creating a blockage, people see a wall, and she doesn't counteract that, the people who need to hear her may not hear her. And I'm not saying that I've been able to completely overcome that, but that awareness helps to counteract, right? So it's important for you in a leadership position to have that understanding. A lot of leaders are not aware of the fact that people are afraid of them. And because they're not afraid of them, so because they are afraid of them, they can go into freeze or flight mode and not be as productive as they should be, simply because you're around, and that is the response that you get from people. Right? Another element that is part of self-awareness is understanding how people experience your actions and your behavior. Right? So this is a little different to what it is that people see when they look at you, when they encounter you for the first time, or when they look at you from a distance. And this is now not people who have interacted with you and have been impacted upon by your actions and your behavior. This is about understanding how your actions and behavior is being experienced by people. Why is this important? Look, at the end of the day, as a leader, you've got certain outcomes that you're looking for. And if you are not aware of the fact that your actions or your behavior may have a negative impact, you may end up with the exact opposite of what it is that you're trying to achieve. So, very important component of self awareness. The next element is, and this is a big one, is being aware of the fact, firstly, that all of us, every single one of us, have unconscious biases that we walk around with, right? So to ask ourselves which biases and unconscious biases influence our actions and our behavior. So we may not be aware of the fact that a certain bias is driving our decision in a particular process. How we see other people, if that is being influenced by bias, we may be going in the wrong direction in terms of how we behave towards those people or the decisions that we make about those people. Um, but if we don't stop in our tracks and ask ourselves this question, is there a possibility that there may be a bias here? Right? So let me use an example um, that may help to illustrate my point, right? So in my coaching practice, um, I deal with mostly with executives. So if I'm sitting with an executive and I project a halo effect around on that person, so halo effect is essentially we putting this person on, for lack of a better term, you're putting this person on a pedestal because this person is in this high-powered job. I may start to, if I put that bias on the person, I may start to not challenge the person the way I should as a coach and in terms of helping that person to get to the outcome where they need to because of the fact that I have already put this halo on this person, right? And I may not be consciously thinking about it. Maybe it's sitting in my subconscious, right? So it's an unconscious bias. It may be a positive regard for this person, but it may be an overly positive regard, which puts me in a position where I am not as effective as I should be. Right? But it starts with the acknowledgement, and this is hard for all of us to be able to stop and say, I have unconscious biases. I, Claudelle von Eck, have unconscious biases. If I don't acknowledge that fact, I then become defensive when I need to deal with the bias within myself, or I may not even begin to explore whether there may be a bias there in the first place. The next element, and the last one that I want to quickly talk about, is your ability to see how you affect the world around you, right? And this is a little different to how people experience your actions and behavior. But it is about understanding that as a leader, when you make decisions, your decisions have ripple effects. And sometimes what seems to be a small decision may have a huge impact in the long run. And understanding that before I make a decision or before I act, that I need to be able to step back and have a conversation with myself and ask this question: how far could this ripple potentially go? Who may be affected by this? How big may the impact be? How far will the ripples go? And will those ripples be positive, or will the ripples be negative? Sometimes the ripples will be positive for some people and negative for other people. If it's going to be negative for some people, how do I counteract that? And that is that awareness that as an individual, but particularly as a leader, that you operate in a system. You're not an island. None of us are. You're operating in a system. You're part of a collective. Your actions are going to have consequences, cause and effect. Yeah. So you're the cause. What is the effect? And is that effect going to be positive or negative? And take responsibility for that. Because at the end of the day, as a leader, responsibility and accountability should be part of your daily mantra, and understand that it is part of your core. Right? So important for us to see all of those dimensions when we talk about self-awareness. Your inner world. What is it that others see when they're looking at you? And here we're not talking about, as I said earlier on, it's not about caring what people think about you from a negative perspective. It is about whether you're going to be able to influence the way you should be. How are your actions and your behaviors being experienced by others? To what degree are your biases, your unconscious biases, influencing your actions and your behaviors? And do you have a good understanding of the ripples and how far the ripples go and how they are impacting the collective, the system around you? And sometimes the ripples in one system can ripple over into other systems and cause a ripple effect across systems. So as leaders, it's really, really important that we reflect on these. Well, I hope that that has helped you to think a little deeper about self-awareness. Self-awareness is one of those elements that are core skills that leaders should have. But self-awareness asks of you to be brave and to see those inflection points and to be brave to put that mirror in front of yourself and look at yourself. Be brave enough to look inside of yourself, warts and all, starting with the understanding that you are a human being. None of us are perfect, and look at ourselves with compassion and empathy, but at the same time with responsibility and accountability, so that we can be the leaders that we need to be in the systems where we find ourselves. In our spheres of influence, it doesn't matter how big or how small the sphere of influence is. Self-awareness is very, very important. Well, I hope that's helped you a little bit. And once again, thank you for watching the video. Thank you for watching for visiting the website. I encourage you to go and have a look at the rest of the website. There are lots of different topics that I discuss on the website. And if there's anything that you would like me to cover, either in my videos or in my written posts, please drop me a note on the website and let me know. Thank you once again. Really appreciate you listening.